Welcome to today's episode of the Food and Travel Podcast by State Street Spices. I'm your host, Andrew Rubin, and I am very excited for today's episode as I will be sharing my personal experiences with cooking, counting down my top 10 favorite dishes to cook. I'm very excited to reveal what I personally like cooking the best, and I've really articulated a list with some of the recipes and spices I've done. But I'm super excited for this episode instead of having it based off of research, just my personal opinions. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's get started with a controversial pick for me. Number 10 is fried rice. Fried rice I occasionally mess up, and when I do mess up, it is really bad. However, most of the time I'm able to get it right, and when I get it right, it tastes amazing, just like it came from a restaurant. And I even think it tastes better than some of the fried rice you would get at restaurants. I personally like making it at home, even though it takes a while. I've done some baked fried rices, which take a while. But if you do it on the stovetop or in a skillet, it might take less time. My personal favorite, though, is to do a baked fried rice because even though it's time consuming, it's not as easy to mess up, and I feel like it actually brings out a lot of flavors. I like just putting in some peas and some carrots, as well as a beef or chicken options, and really just makes an amazing meal and a great comfort food to have. This is really a great item that I like to have for dinner when I have the chance to make it, which is why it's at number 10 for today's list. Coming in at number 9, we have another one that I've personally messed up, but when I make it just right, it tastes amazing. We have chicken parmesan. Chicken parmesan was one of the first dishes that I made where I actually did like a full lengthy recipe, and it turned out really amazing. I like having my chicken parmesan on a little bit of pasta with a lot of the marinara sauce. Chicken parm is really just a great dish to have. It has all the protein when it comes to chicken, but then you can also add some pasta. The tomato sauce is also always amazing. I also really like making recipes. It's pretty simple to do. You can just throw it in the oven is what I usually do, even though there's other ways of making chicken parm that I'm sure tastes even better. Just throwing this in the oven, it's a pretty quick, really delicious meal that I like making on occasion, and it's one of my favorite Italian dishes to make. Next, at number 8, we have another Italian dish, pizza. I really enjoy making pizza because it's so customizable, and also if you don't have a lot of time, you can make pizza, or if you want to make it completely from scratch, you can make pizza. When I don't have a lot of time, I will use a store-bought crust and just add some red sauce, some shredded cheese, some chicken, maybe some pepperoni. It's really a simple dish that you can just throw in the oven and it tastes really amazing. However, if you really want to have a full handmade experience, you can also make the dough from home and then you can make your own marinara sauce, and this turns out really well. I don't get to do this as often because it does take a lot of time and is a lot easier to mess up. However, when I do make pizza from completely scratch, it tastes really amazing, and I really think this is one of the best foods to make. And again, with it being so customizable, there's so much you can do with different pizzas. Next, at number 7, we have banana bread. I do prefer cooking over baking most of the time, as I usually struggle with baking. However, one of my favorite food items to make in general is banana bread. It is really easy to make and also ends up tasting phenomenal. I can never buy store-bought banana bread again, or even some from restaurants, because it tastes perfect when you make it at home, especially when it comes right out of the oven and is warm. And again, this dish is very hard to mess up if you pick the right recipe, and I really just think this is a great dish to have, and really a great item whether you're looking for a breakfast or more healthier of a dessert. Banana bread is a great way to go. Just missing out on the top 5, at number 6 we have guacamole. Guacamole is an amazing dip to make. I've done this recipe on my social media and I would highly recommend you looking at it, as our State Street Spices blend really brings out the flavor of guacamole, it makes any dish taste better. Guacamole is also a pretty simple dish once you get the avocados peeled. I know it can be hard to get the avocado out. However, after you get that avocado and you mashed it, it's really simple. You just add some onions, some peppers, jalapenos. It's really tomatoes. It's really versatile, and you can really do a lot with guacamole. And it just makes every dish taste so much better, which is why it's one of my favorite things to make. Number 5, we have stuffed peppers. There's so much you can do with stuffed peppers. This is another item that I have a recipe on my social media. And I added some ground turkey with some rice, some pepper jack cheese. I think I did a different type of cheese as well. And again, it's really a simple dish. It's also very healthy. You can really make stuffed peppers extremely healthy with the outside being a vegetable and peppers. And there's really just so much you can do with it, and can be pretty simple. Again, if you just want to have some ground beef that you cook and then add it into a pepper with just some cheese, there's really just a lot you can do with stuffed peppers, which is why it's at number 5 for today's list. Number 4, we have our cream cheese dip. This dip I make for all the events at State Street Spices. It's a really simple dip, just using 3 ingredients plus whichever spice blend you choose. I really enjoy this dip, and it's amazing how I'm not a huge fan of any of the 3 items, cream cheese, sour cream, or mayonnaise. However, when you put it together in the right way and you add some delicious seasoning, it tastes so amazing, and I always love making this. It's super easy to just mix together, and then you have the best party dip, way better than any store-bought party dip. So I'd highly recommend making this if you haven't already. It's just half a cup of cream cheese, a quarter cup sour cream, and a quarter cup of mayonnaise, with a couple tablespoons of your choice of State Street Spices blends. And it really just turns out amazing, and is a great dip for any occasion. Starting out the top 3, we have steak. I really enjoy to make steak because there's so many different options you have. There's so many different cuts and thicknesses and all these sort of different things. And I also really like adding our New York steak seasoning to it. There's a reason why one of these 4 seasonings was a steak seasoning, and it's because it really brings out the flavors of the steak. And I really love to have just a nice steak with some broccoli or mashed potatoes, and it's really just an amazing thing to cook. While the temperature is hard to get right, otherwise making a steak is pretty simple, and I think it's really just a great dish to have. At State Street Spices, we have our New York steak seasoning. Our New York steak spice blend adds depth to your favorite foods as a perfect mixed mild blend. It's a blend of flavors that enhances any food, creating a perfect experience with every bite. Whether you're grilling or needing a party dip, this versatile seasoning will elevate your foods, leaving your taste buds wanting more. Just missing out on number 1, we have tacos / burritos / nachos. I put all 3 of these items in the same spot because they are made very similarly, just whether you use a tortilla or a taco shell or chips for nachos. Otherwise, it's made pretty similarly. I really just like making some ground beef or some chicken and adding some of the guacamole we make or some cheese, and it really just turns out great. I really love just making a burrito or taco for dinner, and there's so many different things you can make with it. Really, the options are endless, and it really ends up turning out great because it's such a simple dish, which is why it is number 2 for this list. Before reviewing number 1, I have some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is to mac and cheese. I made this the first time completely from scratch just a few months ago, and it turned out pretty good. There's a lot of tweaks that I want to make to really make a perfect mac and cheese, but I really think making a homemade mac and cheese is a great thing to do, and I'm excited to continue to experiment with it. Another honorable mention is cheesy garlic bread. I do a really good cheesy garlic bread that's a perfect side dish, and there's just a lot of flavors that it brings out. especially adding a seasoning like our St. Louis barbecue blend, or if you want some spice or Nashville hot blend. The next honorable mention is roasted potatoes. Just cutting up potatoes into simple little pieces, adding some seasoning, maybe adding some butter or different other options, and just put it in the oven is really just a great side dish, and I really enjoy making roasted potatoes. The next honorable mention is fajitas. I am a big fan of peppers and onions, so making some fajitas with different meat, peppers and onions, and a tortilla bread is really just a great dish, and it's a really simple thing to make. I really like making this in the skillet, and it's really easy to do and really hard to mess up, which is why it's an honorable mention, with our last honorable mention being meatballs. I made meatballs from scratch for the first time about a year ago, and I made it a few times since then, because it's such a great option, and a lot of times are a lot healthier than the store-bought meatballs, and you can add whatever you want inside. I personally like adding some diced onions, but whatever you add, it really makes a great flavor, and I'd highly recommend making your own homemade meatballs. We have a recipe for sweet and sour meatballs on our social media pages if you want to check that out as well. Now, without further ado, number 1 is chicken Alfredo. I love making chicken Alfredo. While I haven't made noodles from scratch yet, even though I use store-bought noodles, making your own Alfredo sauce that tastes delicious and adding some nicely seasoned grilled chicken, I really like adding our St. Louis barbecue blend to some grilled chicken and then adding some Alfredo sauce, either store-bought or homemade, and just having that on some pasta is just a very delicious dish. It's another really simple dish that you can make pretty easily and make it as customizable and as time-consuming as you want. And this is one of my favorite meals to have at home and is my favorite meal to cook. And I really like to do this dish as much as I can because it tastes so delicious and really isn't too time-consuming. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of the Food and Travel Podcast by State Street Spices. I appreciate all the support you've given this podcast, and I'm super excited to continue to release at least bi-monthly podcast episodes, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Use the code SPICE10, that's SPICE 10, at checkout on StateStreetSpices.com to get 10% off your next order. Thank you.